Welcome to Page One, the award-winning show for writers with the reader in mind.
That draws the reader along, just like fiction.
Here's your host and producer, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Page One. I'm Zita Christian. We're going to turn the tables a little bit tonight. I have asked my friend, the multi-published New York Times best-selling author Carla Neggers, to be on the show with me to ask me some questions about my writing. So we're switching the tables a little bit, and I have to tell you, it is just a little bit unnerving. So first, thank you, Carla. I trust you, Carla. And so yes, so you're in charge.
All right. Well, this is going to be so much fun because Zita's first book, Band of Gold, is being reissued, and I would love to hear more about this because this book is on my personal keeper shelf. It's a wonderful book. So tell us.
Well, the Band of Gold takes place during the Klondike Gold Rush of 1898. And in the story, I have a young medical student. Her name is Aurelia, and which has that Latin derivation of gold, which I thought that was so clever. And then people said to me, I don't know how to pronounce her name. But anyway, her name is Aurelia, and it means gold. So she's a medical student, and she leaves school because she is convinced that she has to go to the Klondike to follow, find, and rescue her little sister Violet, because Aurelia is certain that Violet has been ensnared by this peddler of the flesh, this Svengali-like character, and that she is a victim and she needs rescuing. So Aurelia goes on her way, and of course during the Klondike Gold Rush it is very hard for people to do it alone. They often form partnerships.
Now, what year are we talking about?
1898.
Okay.
1898. So most of the people left for the Klondike either from Seattle or Vancouver. So I set my story in Seattle because it was easier for me to find some research, and I went to Seattle, so I thought that would be good. So she meets this man in Seattle, charming man, banker, and for a variety of things happen, and they wind up forming a partnership with a third person, a young man also, and they're all going to share their resources and go to the Klondike together. And it's only when it's too late to turn back, the ship has gone, dropped him off in Skagway, Alaska, and she can't get back, and finds out that he has a whole ulterior motive for wanting to go. Our banker.
Now tell me how our hero is a Seattle banker. Now, I remember this guy. This is a great hero.
Thank you.
But when you think Seattle banker, how are you making him a sexy character? And he is a really wonderful, memorable character. So tell us a little bit about him.
Well, he has a little boy. He's a widower, and he has a little boy, and he has an aunt who is living with them. So he's a good father. That's one of the things I really loved about him. I made him to be a good father. He comes from the Midwest. He's a very rugged man, but he's a little bit constrained in a suit, but it's a way. He's good with numbers, and he's got a good mind for business. So but unfortunately he got hoodwinked by a little vixen named Violet. So he wants to find this Violet and her partner, and he wants to bring them back to Seattle and stand trial because he thinks, in his mind, Violet is the person who's responsible for for him losing his job and his reputation, and he wants to see her hanged. So
there's some good tension and conflict going on.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about your writing and about reading a historical romance or historical novel is how it can be relevant to today. How do you think this Band of Gold is relevant to today?
I wondered about that. I think the key with historical novels is to make them successful. You have the characters, in whatever the time period is, deal with some aspect of humanity that people deal with today. But So that's there. There's that whole issue of loyalty, that loyalty can blind a person to the truth. Now, that was back then, that's now, that was 1,000 years ago. There are issues of the fact that anybody can be a victim of something depending on what the situation is, and that anybody can be a hero depending on circumstances. That holds true for any time period. But I have to tell you, when I saw, what's the name of that show? Gold Rush Alaska. There's a reality television show on the Discovery Channel now called Gold Rush Alaska. And I thought, oh, well, that's going to be interesting. Let me watch a little bit of that. Well, I got hooked. I mean, I think we're in the 3rd season now. And so you have these men who have formed these the partnerships, just like Clay and Aurelia and Waldo did. And they've formed partnerships, and they're going up to Alaska to find gold. They're desperate. They've left something behind. They've taken huge risk, just like the people in my story did. And they've either their situation at home is a matter of respect, which is Waldo's issue, or it's a matter of finances, which for most of the people in the gold rush of 1898, it was a matter of it was desperate times. And there was talk about, oh, well, you can just pick up nuggets big as your fist on the beach. So people were desperate, and they went there thinking that they would strike it rich. And it was a huge gamble and a risk and a belief in a dream that for most people did not come true. And as I watched that show on Discovery Channel, I thought, it's just the same as it was in 1898. The equipment's different, and their expectations for how much gold they could pull out of the ground, that's different. And whether or not they could fly home when things got bad, that's of course different. But the desperation is there, and the dream of that lure of what they called the yellow, it pulls people now just as it did back then.
So there's a lot of depth and richness.
Richness, yes.
Yeah. No pun intended.
Yes.
So, but Band of Gold is coming out as an ebook. It's being reissued as an ebook, and as a writer and a reader myself, I love the idea of being able to find books that just aren't on the shelves anymore.
Yeah.
You have to. I mean, I've got Band of Gold on my keeper shelf, but other people, they don't know this book. So now there's an opportunity for them to find this book. So tell us about that whole process.
Well, interesting. HarperCollins, through their Monogram imprint, published Band of Gold as a paperback original back in the mid-'90s. And then as time went by, my agent, Charles Schlesinger of Brandt and Hochman, Charles got the rights back. And that's a process. Those of you who are in the audience and you're writers, you publish a book, and then after a while you get the rights back if you've gone to a traditional publisher, if you didn't publish it yourself. So he got the rights back, and then we talked about, well, what do we do with it now? I mean, it's a whole different world now with electronic publishing. I mean, it's a whole new frontier and an opportunity for a new life for books. So we talked some different options, and I learned through my friend Leslie O'Grady, who writes for Samhain Publishing as Lindsay Chase. Leslie said, oh, well, Samhain is a really good publisher. She was very happy with how they handled her books. So I explored a little bit of that. Charles explored, we had some conversations and decided that we liked what they did. And so we sold the rights to them. So they have the rights for 7 years to publish Band of Gold as an ebook. They create all new covers, and I had opportunity to do like a new dedication in the front, but other than that, the body of the book is the same, with the exception of, we caught just a couple little typos that had missed.
There's always something that slipped through.
Always.
I read it, they read it, and then the readers read it, and they let you know. It's great, isn't it?
But I'll tell you
There's
something.
Always something.
There is. And the thing that really struck me, good and bad, as I'm reading it. Now, granted, this book was, published in the 90s. I'm reading it now to do the copy edits, because when it's I don't know what the process is where it gets scanned and goes into some HTML or some other kind of code, and sometimes the letters get quirky. So that's why I had to read it, carefully to make sure all the letters translated. So as I'm reading it, I'm looking at it and I'm groaning, because I thought, oh boy, did I really switch point of view. Oh, that was awkward. Was it bad transition. I mean, I saw every flaw in myself as a writer.
Such
every
a writer
flaw.
thing, isn't it?
It was awful. And then after a while, though, I'm happy to say, I stopped noticing that. And I got to the end of it, and I thought, that was a good story.
It is a
the
great
story.
story.
Was good. I was not the best writer. I'm a better writer now, but the story was still good.
And that's what you read for a lot of times. It's the story and getting involved with these characters. And this whole idea of one of the themes I see in this book is just the vastness of Alaska. And these very vulnerable people who are also so interesting and have so much going on. I mean, there's a lot, you pack a lot in.
There was a lot in there. And I'll tell you, too, the rejections that I got, and I think, I pity the writers out there who have not gotten to the point of actually submitting their work. And I've talked to a couple of them who said, well, I'm worried about getting rejected. And it's like, well, if you
that's fun, isn't it?
then you're not in the game. So get out there, get the stuff out there. But the rejections that I got, they had two comments in common. One was a good one, and that was, well, the woman can write. The other comment was, the book is just different. It's just too different. In fact, Charles had submitted an excerpt to Good Housekeeping magazine at the time, and this was back in the 90s when they would do an excerpt from a novel. And the editor wrote to Charles and said, oh, she really liked the story, she really liked the writing. She said, but this is too gritty for Good Housekeeping. He said, I'm going to have T-shirts made. Band of Gold, too gritty for Good Housekeeping. I never did that. But I forgot where I was going with that.
But that's part of the fun of e-publishing, too, is because it goes out there and maybe there's a lot of people who want to read about 1898, Alaska Gold Rush, really interesting characters and a little bit of grit going on. And they can find it now where quite easily just type in Zita Christian.
Yes.
And
isn't it great?
Up it comes. So
because you know how it used to be. Remember how it used to be? It was a matter of, oh, well, how will I get the word out that I have this book? And it was all about, well, what kind of bookmarks are you making?
Yeah.
Remember? That was it.
Yeah, and it's different now. And I remember when I first started in the business, and they said the average shelf life was somewhere between milk and yogurt.
Yeah.
And now it's out there.
Yeah.
And it's great, though, with the ebooks, because when you do find a little typo, even after it's out there, you can go.
I didn't know that.
Go fix it.
Oh, I didn't know that. And I have to tell you, too, now, if you had asked me 5 years ago what I thought about ebooks, I wasn't very comfortable with the idea. I now have my own, Nook that my daughter and son-in-law gave me, and I bought a pretty cover for it, and I even have a novella that Charles sold to Berkeley, and then it went to Sony for their reader, and so there's a number of different, and it's like a whole new world, and I love it, and now I love the idea that the book is out there as an electronic book.
I love both print and e-publishing. Now, so do you have some more books that are going to be coming out?
Actually, yes, I do. The 3 books that Harper published in the 90s, all are being reissued by Samhain. Band of Gold is the one that comes out in May of this year, 2013. And then in July, First and Forever comes out, and then Just a Miracle comes out after that. So I'll have to have you come back later, and we'll talk more about those shows, because there's all kinds of stories and everything in there behind those. But I have to tell you, one of the things that I find, and I know for you, because you said a lot of your stories in Ireland and you spend a lot of time in Ireland as you're doing your research. I went to Alaska, and I wish I could say that I went to do the research, but at the time when Dick and I went on vacation, I was writing a contemporary story that was it will remain in the drawer forever. It will never see the light of day. And when I was up there, Dick and I were walking around the streets of Skagway, and I walked the old wooden boardwalks, and I walked past the glass window of the Historical Society, and they had a sign there that said they had an exhibit dedicated to the women of the Klondike Gold Rush.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, bing, 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 bing. Exactly. So I went in, and I'm looking at, they have all these diaries that are under glass, and they had mannequins, and they had showed the clothing women wore, even climbing up these mountains with corsets and these little high collars and lace and that stuff. They didn't have like hiking boots and that stuff.
Can you imagine?
No, I can't. I really can't. So I thought that was when I got the idea that I wanted to write a book about a woman who went to the gold rush, but I didn't want her to go for the purpose of finding gold. And that idea, fortunately, came to me at the beginning of our trip. So I still had another 2 weeks where we went all over Alaska. And every time we went to a little town, I would find the Historical Society, because, boy, those places are great. They publish, like in a little magazine form, a lot of the diaries that people kept during the gold rush. So for $2 or $3, I could pick up a reprint of somebody's diary. And one of them that I got took place exactly the time period. I mean, to the day. I know what the weather was like on that particular day, everything.
So it would be easy to get lost in research. How do you know when enough is enough?
Well, I have a very hard time with that. I do. I love research. I love delving into things and learning those little arcane details. And
it sometimes it shows up between the commas, is what I like to say. It's just this one little thing, and you did all this work for this one little thing. But that's what gives the book some authenticity, a sense that you're really there. And that's what
Well, when
I've never been to Alaska, so this was important to me.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because after all the rejections that the manuscript got, Charles sent it over to Harper, and the editor there read it, and she called him up. It was a Monday morning, 10 o'clock, and she had read it over the weekend, said she loved it because it was so different.
See, it doesn't work for me because it's different.
Yeah.
It works for me because it's different.
Yeah.
You see how just that one little.
And one of the things she specifically said was she had not seen a book set in Alaska, and she loved what I had done with the setting.
And now we have Alaska's. We all want to go to Alaska,
Yes.
so go with you through this book. And you mentioned Charles a number of times. I just have to say, he's one of the gems of the business.
Isn't he, though?
This is like, if you think of central casting agent, Charles.
He is.
He's fabulous.
He's
and you have a lot of loyalty in the.
I do. I've been with Charles since 1992. No, that's when he sold it. It was 1990. So for those first 2 years, that was tough. And I thought, he's going to tell me goodbye. I'm not producing. I'm not. The stress.
Oh, he's such a loyal, dedicated agent, and it's just so nice to hear the story. I ran into him at Book Expo America a couple of years ago, and he, Charles, he's coming in, and he says, Carla, he says, and he just mentions of how much he loves you and loves your work, and that's what we want in in the people we work with, because as you know, writing can be a lonely business, so it's nice to have
and you
someone.
second guess everything.
Second guess. So to have someone like a Charles, say Zita, and sometimes what do you when the news isn't so good, you want Charles to deliver.
Well, and he delivers it. He's very candid too. I know if he says something is good, I know he really means it, because there have been plenty of times where he has said, "This isn't working. You might want to fix this one. I have some ideas because this isn't it." And so I know that he's telling me things for my own good, and it works.
And who knew, when you're starting out in the 90s, that here we are with e-publishing.
I know. And
this wonderful book, Band of Gold, gets to come out. But you've written other things too. You've written a play.
Yes. I'm glad you asked about that. And that would be, let's see, which question was that? This one I told you to ask me.
With the little star by it?
Tell me about the play. Well, when I was still working at the Bushnell, Scott Galbraith, who was the head of the programs department, Scott had a background as a director and an actor, and he knew I had a background as a writer. So, long story, but the bottom line was I wrote a play based on a memoir by Dr. Melba Patillo Beals. The memoir is called Warriors Don't Cry. And it's the memoir of Melba's year between the ages of 15 and 16. She was one of the Little Rock Nine who integrated Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, and that event changed the course of integration in our schools in this country. So I wrote the play, and then Scott added, how things should be from the viewpoint of a director and for an actor, because I might have something here, and he would go, well, if the actor is here, the actor can't get over here that fast. You need to move this around. And I don't know any of that. Yeah. So we did this together. And then in 2011, it had several sold-out performances at the Bushnell. The Bushnell produced it. We hired an actor, Almeria Campbell, and a director, Richard Avon, from New York. A lot of rehearsals in New York. That was a whole new experience, renting rehearsal space and just going back and forth to the city to watch rehearsals. It was a whole new world for me. It was great.
Sounds so exciting.
And it was a matter of, okay, seeing the rehearsal, okay, that doesn't work, okay, change that, okay, I'll change that a little bit. And it was wonderful. It was a whole new creative world. So then in 2012, it had a New England tour, which was wonderful. And then this year, 2013, had a national tour. And now the Capital Region Education Council in Hartford has made Warriors Don't Cry, put that on the mandatory reading list.
Wow,
so
that's
I am hopeful for both Melba and for the play that more people will get to see this. I think it speaks so strongly about the value of education. And it speaks to a time in our history when, I know kids today look at it and go, I can't imagine that the world was like that. But it was. I lived through that. Mm-hmm. That was, in my mind, that was not that long ago. So I think Melba's story is important, not just because we need to know our history, but I think it's important because if we don't know what happened then, I think we are doomed to repeat things. And looking back then at issues of what some people initially called bullying, but it escalated and it escalated, and these 9 students were in fear for their life every single day. And I think what most people don't realize in terms of that story, they think, oh, well, that was the year everything, they integrated 1957 to 58, that school year, and so then everything was integrated, but it wasn't, because the Governor Faubus, was so determined to make sure that integration did not come to Arkansas. He shut down all the high schools that following year. Shut them down.
I did not know that. Yeah.
So the white students wound up with private tutoring arrangements and groups, but the African American students had no schools. Many of them left the state. It was a very traumatic time in history, but one student, Ernie Green, he was a senior in that year. Melba was a sophomore. Ernie Green was a senior of those 9. There were seniors, juniors, and sophomores. He did graduate that year, and there was a lot of question, a lot of concern as to whether or not he and his family would be shot. The idea of going to school, of white students going to school with black students, we don't think anything of that today. That's just so normal.
But that was
people are people, but that's not how it was thought of back then. So
that's a play.
That was a play. Yeah. That was enjoyable to do.
So what are you working on now? And are you interested in self-publishing? That's a big thing now.
Well, now that I've sort of embraced the idea, I'm seeing how this whole ebook thing is a good idea. I guess it was back in 1999, my husband, Dick Christian, hiked the Appalachian Trail in what is called a through hiker, which means you do the whole trail, all 2,160 some miles, all at one time. So he flew to Georgia. Yeah, no kidding. That's a lot of wear and tear on the boots. Well, he flew to Georgia, and he hiked from Georgia to Maine, April to September. And along the way, he would call me whenever he would come to a town, and I would ask him a lot of questions, and I would write down everything. And I had, maybe a dozen, 15 or so people I was trying to send these little emails to tell them how Dick was doing. Our neighbor, they had a map on their dining room wall, and they had little push pins where they were marking, how he was, where he was, and that was great. And then my friend Ann Richards and her husband Mike Southern. Mike Southern had come over here from Wales, and he used to do websites and stuff in Wales. And he said, "Well, you shouldn't be doing this like email thing. Just put up a website." And I said, "I haven't even figured out how to do group email yet. I'm doing them one at a time. I don't know how to do a website." He said, "I'll do a website for you. Be my gift." So he created this website that I called Dick Takes a Hike. So, and it's still up. DickTakesAHike.com is still available. And so I would send the information to Mike. And he would put it up on the website. Now, this was before digital cameras. Well, before we had a digital camera, anyway. So I would buy film, and I would buy those little mailers where, and I would send everything to Dick in his food packages. So the little disposable cameras. So he would take pictures, and then he would pop the disposable camera in the envelope and mail it. And it would go to the processing, the film house. They would develop the pictures and send them to me. I would mail the pictures to Mike. He would scan them in, put them on the website. I mean, such a process, such a process. But I did this for the entire journey. And the beauty of the internet is there are people all over the world who are reading this stuff. I'm getting mail from Guam, from France, from Africa, from people who want to know, well, where is he now? What's he doing now? I'm going, I don't know. He hasn't called me yet. He's out in the woods somewhere. And so now I'm looking at that with the idea that since the body of it is done, I would want to tweak it and bring it up to date and give a different perspective, because since the hike, Dick had a whopper of a heart attack on another hike. And he's back to hiking, so all of that's good. But I want to explore the idea of creating an ebook for Dick Takes a Hike.
Absolutely. Oh, that would be so fascinating. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
It could work, because the hike is still the same.
Yeah. Well, they've added a couple miles, but it's pretty much
what's a couple miles?
Couple miles, yeah, exactly. It's all good enough. And I think that kind of looking at the creativity, like that's keeping a journal for him, and then doing the play, and then doing the historical novels. And I'm working on a little contemporary story now that's a little too fresh to talk about. It's not it hasn't gelled enough yet. But it's all these different ideas, different things, and a sitcom that I did with some friends a while back that we're resurrecting. And it's all just part of that being creative and trying something new and different.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it is. And I have to tell you now that we're out of time. So Carla, thank you very much for interviewing me on my show.
Fun.
It was fun.
It was great.
So when the next books come out, I'd love to have you come back and we'll do this again.
We will.
So thank you very much. And I want to thank you in the audience for staying with us tonight and hearing about all that I've got going on in my life as a writer. And also want to thank my crew tonight. And I love to close with the words of the fantasy writer, Ursula Le Guin, who said, "There have been civilizations that did not use the wheel, but there have been no civilizations that did not tell stories. So find your story and find a way to tell it. And do join us again next time. Thank you."
Food for the crew and guests is provided by Manchester Grill of Manchester, Connecticut, and Angelo's Restaurant of Glastonbury, Connecticut. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email Zita at zitatv.com or write to Zita Christian, Page 1 TV, P.O. Box 1515, Manchester, Connecticut 06045-1515. You can watch this and other episodes of Page 1 on youtube.com/Zita3x3.